G'day and welcome back to the Talking Leadership TV podcast series. Thanks for joining us again. Our guest today is Justin Lippiatt. He's the General Manager of the Yandina Station, a working cattle farm that offers wedding and conference opportunities with luxury accommodation. He oversees its daily operations, strategic planning and financial performance. He has over 20 years of experience in various management roles across different sectors and brings a wealth of knowledge, skills and insights to his position, as well as a strong service ethic and a passion for excellence. He's a chartered manager, a credential that demonstrates his ability to apply the highest standards of professional practice and ethical conduct in leading and developing teams, delivering results, and creating value for customers and stakeholders. He's also the founder of a consultancy that answers big questions with empowering solutions, nurturing significance, and retaining people. His mission is to make a difference in the communities he serves by providing innovative and inclusive solutions that meet their diverse needs and aspirations. Our conversation focused on challenges to leadership practice. I know you'll enjoy today's discussion as much as I did. Thanks for joining us again, but enough from me. I'll hand over to Justin.
Justin, thank you for agreeing to do the podcast, mate. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Look, before we get into the conversation, and today the topic area is going to be around challenges facing leaders. We had a discussion offline as to which of the topics you'd like to most engage in. But before we do, tell us a little bit about yourself, Justin.
Just I guess being able to be in lots of different industries, lots of different sectors. Got sort of the jack of all trades and the master of none. I guess I just love growing organizations and growing people, and very entrepreneurial. But I guess at the heart of that is just my desire to serve others and to make sure that I can add value to people's journey.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. We also spoke about in preparation for this discussion around the various leadership theories, and you threw servant leadership at me as something that you're very much connected with. So what is it about that form of leadership for you that's important for you in the role of a leader?
It actually goes back to one of the things I believe is a big challenge for leadership, and that's trust. Servant leadership is the foundational pillar for trust. It lays the foundation for integrity. It lays the foundation for a whole lot of different things, and it basically shows that as a leader, you're prepared to roll up your sleeves, get in and amongst the troops, and do what needs to be done to get the job finished. That you're no better than anybody else, and that although you may be the leader or the head of a team, at the end of the day, without the team, you have nothing anyway. So your best asset is to make sure that your team is functioning well, that they're looked after, and that you're there to serve them as much as they are serving you and the organization, and obviously the purpose of the organization.
Yeah, I like that response. I think the inherent in the role of leaders, and I think for the better leaders amongst us, that idea of serving the people that work with you and to some extent for you is a different mindset to some other theories of leadership around, the leader has to set the example and there are followers versus the leader being in a pivotal role. And I guess without getting in too much into the weeds around which leadership theory works best, I'm a pragmatist at heart, and I think we apply different elements of different leadership theories to our day-to-day, because if it was as black and white as some people think leadership is, then it would be very easy and there would be not much discussion around what is the purpose of being a leader, let alone working with the other human beings that we have to work with on a regular basis. I appreciate the scene setting here because it gets into this idea of what challenges are facing leaders. So I'll start with the first topic area, if I can, with you, Justin, around what do you think from your travels this year are the biggest leadership challenges out there?
I think so. I have three, and I won't necessarily elaborate too much on all of them, but the first is around trust. So how do we get our teams to trust us? How do we get our teams to be fully engaged with us, the vision, and what the purpose is of the organization? So for me, there's some key elements of trust. The first is that we need to be vulnerable, not bleeding all over everybody, but we need to be vulnerable. We need to have integrity. So put our money where our mouth is, keep to our word. We need to be accountable. So when things go wrong, we need to be the first ones to put up our hands and say, hey, look, I stuffed up here. Another one is that we need to be firm. So just because I'm a servant leader doesn't mean I'm a doormat. It doesn't mean because I choose to serve that I'm a slave, right? It just means that I choose from my position of leadership to be in and amongst the troops and to add value to their environment. The next one is around giving encouragement. Nothing adds more value to an employee or a staff member or a team member than affirmation or encouragement. And we're not talking about empty flattery here. We're talking about actually encouraging people to do the job to the best of their ability. And we don't want people to be better because that infers that they were bad or worse. We want people to be bigger versions of themselves in the roles that they're fulfilling. The next piece there is around giving credit. So I'm not, humble bragging. I'm not saying, you know what, Eric, you did a great job, and well done, kudos to you. But it was actually all my work. You know what I mean? That's not what it's all about. It's about saying, hey, buddy, you did a fantastic job there. And I just wanted to acknowledge you and let you know that I recognize the work that you put into that. What does it cost? It costs nothing, but the impact and the significance of it is remarkable. And I guess the last thing there is actually about being kind. Just because I'm the boss, just because I can make really tough decisions, just because I'm in a position of leadership doesn't mean that I can't be kind. So there's this element of just being able to get around people, be empathetic, to listen, not just hear, because we can hear. If as a married man, I'm guilty of hearing my wife, but not listening, and so I can get myself into trouble by through through that process. But I guess listening really shows empathy, and so just being kind. It costs nothing. It doesn't impact the bottom line from an expense perspective, but it adds value from a revenue perspective. So
Yeah,
that's
there's
trust.
yeah, 100%. Sorry to interrupt that. There's mate, we could do hours of discussion around those. It was five, not three, but they're all very good
Oh,
topic
no,
areas
I've
that
got
we
three other things. I've got
oh,
two other
okay.
pieces to go.
But before you
Yeah,
go to them, I think the connection between being empathic, demonstrating empathy, and then listening, those things are critically important. And I've been in situations personally where I get a lift when someone's actually heard what I've said
yeah.
rather than giving the tokenistic, yeah, that's great, let's move on.
Mm.
That does more to build credibility with the leader that you're working to than almost anything else. I mean, the money's nice and perks that go with the job are all good, but to feel like you've been heard is critically important. So I'll let you get on to those other two elements, mate.
Sure, absolutely. And just to add to that before I move on to the next point, Eric, is my dream, my aspiration as a leader, as someone in business, as somebody in the community is to find ways to, I want people to want to come to work every day. I want people to want to come to work every day, not get out of bed and say, "Oh God, I got to go to work today," and "Oh, this, that." I want people to jump out of bed like those shampoo adverts of the 80s where the lady sits up in bed and the hair just perfect and she jumps out of bed, fully made up. She just jumps and springs up. That's how I want my team members to come to work every day. I want them to be super pumped about. And you're right, it's not going to always be about money or business conditions or the role necessarily that they need to fulfill, but it's about how they feel within themselves and in the environment in coming to work. The second thing, we touched on a little bit about this before, is fellowship. And for me, as I said before, fellowship is the new leadership. For decades now, we've focused on developing leaders. And I don't have any challenge with developing leaders at all. But what I've come to learn over a period of time is that the more we focus on leadership, the less we focus on followers. So that the aspiration is for team members to want to be the leader, not necessarily to be the best team member. So we need to be in a position where we're saying, how can I get people to follow me? If I say who wants to be a leader, people will generally put their hands up. And sometimes those people aren't or don't have the capacity to be leaders at all. And you really don't want them to be leaders. But if you're focusing
on... that's come up a lot, that when you're looking for leaders in a business, the ones that put their hand up first are probably not the ones that you want to necessarily elevate. Yeah, that actually made me laugh quite a bit. It's come up a fair bit on recorded discussions and in the background, and again, no names have been used, but yeah, there's always this thing that keep in your mind that the first person to put their hand up might not be necessarily the best person to promote to a leadership role. So sorry, keep going, mate.
No, it's true. The whole sort of choose me. Yeah, not always the best leader, right? And not always the best captain of the team either. So my philosophy at the moment is to focus on followers, on how I can keep them engaged. And I'm talking about those elements of trust that I was talking about before, how I work that into our day-to-day, how I can keep the followers engaged. And you know what? The leaders will float to the top. They always do. The real leaders will float to the top in any team environment, in any organization where there's a flatline structure. The leaders will always, I'm not talking about the choose me guys. In time, the leaders will actually start to float to the top. John Maxwell, in the 21 Laws of Leadership, Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, several years ago, he's changed it now, but he talked about the law of E.F. Hutton. The law of E.F. Hutton. And I've never forgotten that. It's basically, if you can envisage sitting around a board table with a whole lot of people, and somebody wants a question answered, who's the person that everybody's going to look to for resolution? It's not necessarily the president or the chair or the perceived CEO or whatever that may be. They're always looking to somebody at the table who may not be the leader for that resolution. That's gravitas. That's a position of leadership. That's almost statesmanship, right? Where you don't have to say, hey, I'm the leader, or you don't have to wear a badge, or you don't have to do those kinds of things. You just got to be the person that people want to follow, and that they trust and they want to follow. And that extends to business. How do I get customers? How do I get people to follow my brand? How do I get people to follow my product? How do I get people to... So it's the extension of followers. And I'm not talking once again about creating slaves or mindless robots or anything like that. I just want to be able to get down in and amongst the troops and say, what is it that I need to do for you to jump out of bed every day to follow me? And as a veteran in the military, it's a different set of circumstances because you're ordered to do that, but you follow instructions, you follow orders. But in a civilian context and in an organizational context, you want people to be able to follow you with enthusiasm and zeal.
Sorry, I was going to say, I've had the good fortune to talk to serving and ex-military people around leadership in the context of the military. And yeah, like you said, there's a command structure, there is a motivation because there's a chain of command, and you're trained to do what you do at your level, and hopefully you can do above your level and below your level, so you're being able to multitask. But that's a very different set of environments when you're talking about the military. But this idea about being motivated, you still have to be motivated to follow those orders and get up and do your thing. And I think in the civilian context, like you said, you'd rather people show up there are some people in organizations, and this is across the spectrum. There are some people that view work as a very transactional process. I turn
Yeah,
up, I give my labor, I go home.
absolutely.
I don't bring any of myself to the
Yep,
workplace. However,
sure.
even those human beings want an environment where they're left alone to do their thing, and then
Absolutely.
they're not impediments aren't put in their way. And I guess the final observation is, and I've had to have these discussions with my sons around what the world of work is, and um, for me, it's some days you get up and there's nothing but you looking forward to making a difference. And then
Yep.
others you wish you didn't have to get up because you know what's ahead of you. And I figure that if work was fun, you'd get up in the morning, say, I'm going to fun for 8 hours of my day, not necessarily work. So I think there's a spectrum there of people, but take your point 100% that if you can make that experience less threatening or more inviting or more collaborative, whatever the end goal is for you as a leader, then it may fundamentally change how you do your business as a leader, let
Mm.
alone the motivations of the team members that are there. So they're quite good. Was there another element that you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, the third element there was grow, right? I'm a big fan of grow. I work in agribusiness at the moment, so it's particularly pertinent. But I have a mantra that goes, grow me, grow you, grow together. Grow me, grow you, grow together. And basically what it means is that I should be looking at ways to develop myself. I should always be looking at ways to be a bigger version of myself. And I'm looking at, are there skills? Are there things that I need to learn? Are there things that I need to do better? And there are. I have faults and failings as much as anybody else. What are the things that I need to be focusing on? And I'm not going to spend more than 20% of my time focusing on my weaknesses, because if I focus 80% of my time on my weaknesses, all I'll ever be is mediocre. If I focus 80% of my time on what I'm good at, I have an opportunity to be great. Doesn't mean I dismiss the weaknesses, but I only put 20% of my time into that. So there's this element of growth, not only in my strengths, but also aware of my weaknesses. The second thing in that is grow you. So my experience is that the greatest fulfillment that people can have is in the development of themselves and their environments that adds value to them and the people around them. Nothing is more valuable than a pat on the shoulder saying, well done, good job. So if as people are growing themselves, like me, I'm focusing on my personal growth, and I'm start to help you focus on your personal growth or your professional growth. We start to I'm focusing on me, you focusing on you, you focusing on you, you focusing on me, and so we actually grow together. So to grow me, grow you, grow together, and that's how you grow organizations. That's how you develop great culture.
Yeah, that was one thing that was on my mind around asking the building of a of a growth mindset in the business, continuous improvement culture. I think those things are a lot easier to do when you've got people fundamentally on board with the mission or the purpose of the organization, be that in the for-profit or not-for-profit spaces.
Sure.
This
Yep.
is a really good grounding then to then ask you some questions around what did you see post COVID? Because I think some
Yeah.
of what you're talking about here would be a very tactical, strategic response to what happened from
Yeah.
the worst
Absolutely.
elements of the COVID
Absolutely.
situation. Before we go there, one thing that I've got out of our conversation, I appreciate you bringing this up, is I know that there's a fairly rich literature around followership, and it's not something that I looked at in my own postgraduate studies, but I am going to, when we get off this discussion, have a look at some of that to reorient myself around why that doesn't get as much airplay as developing the leader, given that the success or not of organizations comes down to the cohesion and the ability to get things done by your team rather than the leader, because 100 leaders aren't going to get much done. If you've got a good leader and 100 followers that are very, very motivated to get to an end point, you've got a very different scenario. And I think that's what you've painted with the discussion so far. But getting back to the chat here, Justin. So post-COVID, I believe what you've said to this point is a what a proactive response to what happened from there. So what did you see post-COVID, and did some of your thinking get shaped by what you saw during that period?
Yeah, absolutely. If I may just loop back to the challenges in leadership, I believe that the vacuum of those 3 points creates an absolute challenge in leadership, right? So then to come back to the question now, those 3 things were very clearly defined for me during the COVID years. So at the time, I was, running a manufacturing business, and the supply chains just dried up. It was an incredibly difficult period of time. I came out of sold the business, just couldn't hold on any longer. Basically, went from there into the not-for-profit sector, and we were working with people. I had a large team around Australia, based in regions and remote areas, as well as urban areas, that were dealing with Indigenous and disadvantaged Australians. And we were dealing with this stuff remotely. So, that was two-dimensional relationships. I know it sounds really hard, but that's something that we learned to do, right? Is we learned how to engage with each other through a screen rather than face-to-face. We've had to learn a whole new style of body language, right? Because now it's only what you see from the shoulders down. So I've had to be more expressive in my facial expressions. I can't just be talking to you monotone like this and then hope that you're going to be engaged. It just doesn't work, right? So there's a whole new thing of showmanship when it comes to Zoom meetings and how expressive you can be, because you can't see that I'm tapping my leg underneath or fiddling with my pen or anything like that. All those other little signs that we used to take of boredom or disengagement or whatever. So there's other things that we need to think about when we're engaging with people in the two-dimensional space. But I had teams that had been locked in, and locked out for team members that had for days, like nearly a whole year in Victoria, 3 to 6 months in New South Wales. And there was no way that I could continue to push metricated motivation. In other words, I couldn't go to them with the numbers every day and say, guys, we need to do this. Are you doing this? Are you doing this? And I'm not a micromanager by any stretch of the imagination, right? But there's those KPIs that we needed to chase. And I just couldn't do it anymore. I just thought, these guys are stressed to the max. We've got clients that are actually committing suicide or threatening to commit suicide. People that are disadvantaged, that have put their life savings of $1,200 into this business that they're building, only for it to be locked down or locked out or locked in, depending on what community or where they were. And my team members are carrying that vicarious trauma themselves, and then they're trying to deal with their own stuff, being locked in and the isolation. And so, I just changed tack completely, and I just said, I'm just going to love on you every day. I'm not going to talk to you about the numbers. I'm not going to talk about what you have to do. I'm just going to check in with you, and I'm just going to make sure that you're okay. I just want to make sure that you've got everything that you need, that you're encouraged. And I'm not talking about just empty flattery. I just want to make sure that I'm encouraging you, lifting you up, and providing you with the resources that you need to be able to do what you need to do every day. But more than that, I just genuinely and sincerely care about you. And that was my focus for 6 months. And so that was sort of going from 2021 into 2022. And we just saw a remarkable change. And, I sort of use this phrase from time to time, that I was able to love a team to higher performance. The team actually performed better by being loved on than me wielding a stick above them for the metrics. So very much changed my understanding of that. And then looking at the people that we were dealing with and the organizations that we were dealing with, the government agencies, was how am I going to inspire you to follow me? How am I going to inspire you or motivate you to follow my team members? I'm a leader, so what? I don't care. Just all I want you to do is to be able to get on the bus with me. And I've been guilty, Eric, unfortunately, of being that kind of leader that jumps on the bus, cranks it into gear, and pulls off and leaves half the passengers behind. Right? I've done that behind. As a leader, you sort of go, and that's great. You can also be the kind of leader, which I'm not, that sits on the bus and waits until everybody's fallen asleep before you pull off. I'm not one of those either, but I think it's engaging with your team members or your peers in such a way that is really authentic, but shows that you care. And if you really care, it goes so far. And that extends back to that trust factor. Just be kind, be empathetic, just encourage people, give them credit, empower them. People will go, usually, if they loved on, they will go far and far and above your expectations.
It's really interesting what you've just outlined there. I think for some of the humans listening to this that are in leadership roles, doing what you're talking about is not naturally in the
No,
DNA. It's
it's
something
not
that
corporate
needs to
culture, right? It's not
no,
corporate culture.
no, no, not if you think that there is a standard template for what a leader is in the
Mm.
corporate environment. I think, and this is all due respect to those in leadership positions, that you come to some of these realizations about how you deal with the other humans that are there sharing your space and trying to get something done in an organization. I think some of what you're talking about, and this is a personal perspective, I'm not saying you think this, but
Sure.
I think the more self-actualized you are around, hey, what are my strengths, weaknesses, and what is my motive? What is my why for being in a role to start with is fundamentally important to delivering the things that you're talking about. So I think Australians in particular, I've found, so I've had chats to guests internationally, and they have all sorts of assumptions about Aussies and what we do. And I think one thing we do well is our bullshit reader is quite highly attuned. And so if
Yeah.
somebody is genuinely disingenuous when they're engaging, you pick up on that shit
Yep. Straight
immediately.
away.
And there's nothing more
Yep.
toxic than somebody clocking you and saying, "Yeah, I know what you're about, and you're not about me."
Yeah.
That ends any
Absolutely.
possibility for growth in my mind.
Yeah.
And
Agreed completely.
I think that radar gets more attuned as we get older and more experienced in different careers. That you just pick that stuff up, and I find it a useful training ground for anyone in the leadership position to go to workshops or webinars, or whether they're face to face or on Zoom or Teams or big meetings, where just let everyone speak and just get a sense of what's happening in the
Yeah.
room to see who's who in the zoo, and you pick up quite quickly the power position players, those that are very much about the group, those that don't know what's going on. Just um, take it all in. And I'm very much of the ilk that I like to let the others speak before I say my piece. I need to
Mm.
think about what's happening before I do anything. And I like the analogy of I was the leader at times that got on the bus and left um, half the people behind. I don't think there was ever intention with that. I think
No.
it's because you're at a certain speed. Sometimes we expect the team to be at that speed, and that's not necessarily true. And nor is it necessarily productive, because some people need a bit more time to
Yeah.
get up. One thing I'll note in what you said is, and this is part of the some of the discussions I had last year with guests, was if your motivation is about if you're a self-motivated person and you don't need to be around people, you engage with the world of work a little different. If you're
Mm.
extroverted and you need others around you, excuse me, one thing I would note is what COVID did was make the life of the extrovert extremely difficult, because if you need people around you to fuel you
Yeah.
to get creative and do your job, it would have been exceedingly difficult. And you use the word two dimensions when you're talking about Zoom and the things that we're doing now. I think there's some truth to that, but there's also what else did we have as a tool to engage? And
Yeah,
when you
absolutely.
talked about new body language and not being monotone, you can tell in a big meeting area when somebody's looking at another screen or not
Yep.
paying attention. The eyes go, the
Yeah.
focus goes, and I I don't know, and I've never seen anyone do this because I don't have the nous to do it, but I've never seen anyone pull up a meeting and chastise someone for not giving due attention or
Yeah,
for
I have.
being present. I've
Yeah,
not
yeah.
seen it. I'd
I
love to
have.
see what that
I
looks like.
literally
Yeah,
have seen it. And
yeah,
so it's funny because especially as we've become more technologically adept at doing Zoom meetings and that kind of thing, we've developed the passion for additional screens and monitors. And so what will often happen is you've got your camera over here and you've got a screen over there. And so this happens. And so you say, Justin, are you engaged in the meeting? Yeah, yeah, yeah. What are you doing? Um, Working. Are you answering emails while we're having a conversation? I'm just being productive, Justin. I'm just being productive. I'm multitasking, and I can almost, I've never gone to the point of saying, okay, what did I just say? What did I just say? I've never gone that far, but I've always the chastise is a nice way of basically bringing people back into the conversation, and I think it's interesting because uh, there are those dynamics that you referred to, which are so strong. So, a peer, colleague, friend, business leader on the Sunshine Coast, they spent a significant, like multi-million dollars renovating their offices, and then COVID struck, and they are a legal practice. And so, just as at the onset of COVID, we had a Zoom meeting with this guy, and he said, look, it's just we've got this multi-million dollar office floor that we've just renovated, $2.7 million or something it was. He said, it's just me and the receptionist in the office. Everybody's working from home. And so like it was, oh my gosh, like how's this going to work? And probably about 6 months later, we had another catch up, and he said, productivity has gone through the roof. I said, well, that's interesting. He said, yeah, because people are billing more hours every day than they were in the office. That was just interesting that people were now navigating their day-to-day life, but spending more time online. So maybe answering emails at 10 o'clock in the morning, and then again at 10 o'clock at night, rather than just sort of squeezing it into their 9 to 5 day. The second thing that came out of that was also interesting. He said, "Well, now that people have returned to work, the photocopier politics is back, and the coffee room conflicts are back, and those dynamics. So when they try to force everybody to come back to work, there were people that were not happy about being there, and productivity went down as people started to engage with each other in that environment." And then the third scenario was, okay, if you want to work from home, you can. If you want to work from office, you can. But 2 days or 1 day a week, I need you to come here so we can have a team meeting, a group meeting, whatever. And so the productivity went from sort of not flatline, but from being productive to hyper productive to unproductive, back to that sort of median.
it's interesting you mentioned that.
Yeah.
I have given this a little bit of thought, and it's definitely an area of interest for me. In that, yes, for those that had to work from home, particularly in white collar jobs where you didn't need to be on a factory floor working in person, like say a nurse or an emergency responder, where you need to be out of doors around people. That yeah, if you were home, you could be. It's quite reasonable to assume that you were more productive, and there's evidence to suggest that that happened. Come back to an office space that you'd left behind for maybe 6 months, a year, and you're not as productive. I think that time that people were away from the office gave them a chance to reevaluate what the world of work meant to them.
Absolutely.
And this is I don't know how often this discussion is being had. If people are fundamentally reevaluating what the meaning of work is to them,
Mm.
then the office environment is just another of many environments in which they can be productive, and
Yeah,
trying to get out of the heads
absolutely.
of some people in leadership roles on boards that if they're not in the office, they're not doing their job
Absolutely
is
right.
almost, it's almost nanny state type thinking that, let's say it was us two and I was working for you, Justin, and you said, look, I'm happy for you to work fully remote. Part of you saying that to me would be he trusts in my professional judgment and I
Yep.
can just get the outcomes. Um, it's the tension between you, Justin, as the business owner wanting an outcome, and me as your human resource in the business to say, you don't need to give a crap about my process as long as I get you the result. Why do you care how or where I do the doing of the work? And that for some leaders is almost mind breaking. No, I
Yeah.
need to see you here so that I know that the work is happening. And that what does that say to me as a professional? Well, you don't trust what I do. Screw your job. I'll go look somewhere else where they do trust my professional judgment. And people are making that call a lot now, quite a
What
lot.
about, so it wouldn't be too far of a stretch if we continue that conversation, Eric, to say, as a parent with children that went through my kids were at uni at the time, but if you were a parent and you had children going through that COVID period that were being homeschooled, the great illustrations of children that were being homeschooled that absolutely flourished in that environment, and from the same family, children that absolutely bombed in that environment. So there is this recognition of, you know what, actually, Eric needs to have people around him to flourish. And Justin's quite happy to stay at home. He's a homebody. It may not be around being introverted or extroverted. It's just an environment that they prefer to flourish in. And so it's not such a hard stretch to talk to parent, from as a business leader. Well, as a parent during COVID, if you had kids at school, you had to deal with this every day. Why can't that be a stretch to how you do work every day? Because that's the new work. They growing up, those generations, the millennials, the Gen Alphas, they growing up in an environment where, at the interview, I'd like to, is there a possibility of working remotely? And so that's going to be, no, you got to come to the office. You're just being lazy. You want to watch Netflix until 2 o'clock in the morning, play your Xbox until 4, sleep until 12, and then try and work for the rest of the day. It doesn't work like that. We've got to be able to be flexible. I remember when I was in the military, and it's something that's always stuck with me, and it's the US Marine Corps motto, which is improvise, adapt, overcome. Improvise, adapt, overcome. And so as we go through life, we're going to meet so many challenges. But the more proactive we are around the learnings from COVID, because we actually saw each other at our worst, I think, in some ways, didn't we? There was no, I mean, like I'm just thinking, if we're at a networking event, then Eric could prance around and say good day to everybody, and everybody's patting him in the back, and here's Eric, oh wonderful. You don't have that opportunity in that two-dimensional screen. You know what I mean? You've got to be the real Eric, and you've got to motivate people from that screen. And if you can do that, then you can do it in real life. But if you can only do it in real life and you can't do it in the screen, then maybe there's some development that you need to consider in yourself.
Yeah, 100%. Look, I can't disagree with what you're saying. I think the context in which we work is critically important. And yeah, it might not be a introvert extrovert thing. I think when I mentioned that, what I meant to say, and I didn't say it out loud, so how would you know what I meant, is some people get energized from being
Yeah,
around the other humans and in that environment, and some people, and I fall into the latter category. I do my best work, I think, when I'm left to my own devices to just get
mm.
in my own headspace and do the work. That doesn't mean I don't want to be around the other humans,
Yeah,
but for the time that I'm doing my work, I need a certain environment in which I'll be more
sure.
productive. And look, I was one of a cohort of individual leaders that I'd been working remote since 2014. So I'd had 10
Wow.
years of this. And in the lead up to COVID, I didn't understand the gripes of some people that couldn't be in an office space anymore. I'm going, isn't this a much better alternative. And then
Mm.
after a little bit of soul searching and actually speaking to people who were working in corporate environments, it was a bit of a shocker for some, and for others, it was quite an eye opener. So yeah, look, we could unpack COVID for a long time here, Justin. But
Yes.
I need to ask you before we wrap up
Sure.
tips for leaders around dealing with the challenges. And you've mentioned what your approach to leadership is and what you think were gaps through COVID. So if you had to provide some advice to those that are listening to the discussion, what would you say about dealing with challenges that may present themselves? Give me a couple of tips.
Be fully transparent and honest with yourself. Start there. And then, you don't need to share, that you were in the fetal position under your desk at 4:30 in the afternoon because you were overwhelmed and under-equipped to deal with a challenge at work. You don't need to share that. But people do need to know that you are real, that you are a person. And I learned this phrase when I first came to Australia. And it's not a popular phrase, but it's just something that stuck with me. Somebody had said when I first came to Australia in 2007, and it was this thing about the egalitarian culture in Australia and mateship. And it was the dunny is a great leveler. Everybody has to go to the dunny. So at some very base form, everybody bleeds. Everybody has to go to the dunny. So we're literally the same, right? And so people want to know that you are real. Yes, you may sit in a tower, you may do this, you may be in the trenches, doesn't really matter, but people need to know that you're real, and you need to be authentic, and you need to be transparent in that. The second thing is around the understanding of what values your team members have and how they align to the organization. Because as more often you can try and bring that alignment together, you will increase engagement. If my value is, if one of my primary values is respect, then as an organization, if the organization is around respect, if I disrespect you, then I'm disrespecting the organization. So when I start to bring that alignment between personal values, and which don't always match, of course, excuse me, with that of the organization, the more alignment I can get, the greater the engagement, because that drives accountability. And the last thing, I guess, is around this concept of loving on your team. I've come across quite a lot of resistance around this, to be quite honest with you. As people have said to me, that is an absolute display of weakness. It's a display of weakness. I said, oh, really? Okay, well, that's fine. That's your perception. It works for me, and it's certainly for the people that work for me or worked for me. It works for them. So and it may not be the same or contextually right for everybody else, but I'd like people to consider that care for your peers, your colleagues, your team members is a huge generator of goodwill, a great contributor to well-being, and dare I say, an improvement and an increase to your bottom line.
Justin, thank you for your time, mate.
No
This
problem
was
at all,
fantastic.
mate.
For those listening, this is the Talking Leadership TV podcast series. Thank you for joining us again. Have a great day, rest of your week, and we'll catch you on the next episode of the podcast.